Well, one second. Okay. What's up, you guys? Chet Guthrie, the Dream Poet here, coming to you all with the final edition of my Haunt Season series, live podcast series, Fascinating People and Extraordinary Stories. However, well, this is not the end of my series as a whole. I mean, next month in November, I will be starting another part of the Fascinating People and Extraordinary Stories broadcast interview series known as Rise of the Vloggers. Yes, for the entire month of November, I will be interviewing nothing but YouTube vloggers, from urbexers to ghost hunters to everything in between. But really, you guys, as I'm saying this, I want to go ahead and talk about our guests tonight. These guys, they purchased what started as a fun venture down to St. Augustine, Florida, turned into them purchasing what they thought was going to be an antique store at the time. But it turned out to be that not only did they purchase an antique store, or what would become an antique store, they bought St. Augustine, Florida's first jail. Anyway, you guys, I want to introduce to you all Larry and Denise Altman.
Hey everybody, Chad, how you doing?
Hi, Chad.
Doing good. I do apologize for everyone that I wasn't able to get the cool countdown thing up, but anyway, y'all are here, and I guess we'll start from the very basic question. Introduce yourselves. Tell us a bit about who you are.
Well, we appreciate that. The beautiful lady sitting next to me, as you know, is my beautiful wife, Denise, spelled with a C. So never spell it with an S. She will get you. Um, and and we met uh, through a mutual friend a number of years ago. We've been married now 23 years, and we used to live in South Florida, Broward County, near Fort Lauderdale. And I think it was, I don't know when we started coming to St. Augustine as tourists, but honey, probably 1999, 2000, something like that. We just started traveling the 5 hours up the coast, came to town, fell in love with it, fell in love with the store itself as we were passing by on one of the red tourist trains, and made a decision just because it looked great. Say, hey, we got to go back there during our visit here, which we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't know why, other than it looked interesting. I think perhaps my wife, who is, I would call her a sensitive rather than a psychic, because when I call her a psychic, she says I can't control that, so I'll just call her sensitive. And I'm not. I'm just one of those clods that just kind of walks around and does does whatever happens to be coming his way. So yeah, I mean, we did come back to the store. We went inside. It was jam packed with a bunch of goodies. It existed before we bought it as antiques and uniques collectibles. The people who owned it at the time, we were talking to them perhaps about purchasing. They really weren't interested. But every time we came back to town as tourists, we would stop back in. They eventually sold it to somebody else. And, without going into huge details, in 2010, the people they sold it to uh, were there. My wife and I walked into the store as we were touring the town again because we just love to do it. Lady was behind the counter, almost hiding, I guess would be a right.
Yeah, true.
Almost hiding behind the counter, and my wife started chatting with her.
Imagine that.
Yeah, can you imagine my wife talking? That never happens. Uh, and uh, my wife mentioned that Denise told her, said, "Hey, look, at one time we were interested in buying the store." Lady jumped up and said, "What did she say, dear?"
It's for sale now.
So yeah, it's for sale now. So we actually purchased it, and closed within 10 days
Yeah. it's
and
really
had the
short.
keys to the store.
She couldn't wait to get out.
Couldn't wait to get out.
Now, I guess Denise, since you are sensitive, like, did the energy about the building kind of hit you at first, or did it take time to really kick in?
A
Like
little bit of both. A little bit of both. I knew something was up when we walked in the door, but then I couldn't really figure out what. So it did take a little bit of time to kind of figure out who was who and wow, there's a lot of you and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
It's really cool.
And like, when did I guess like when did you all find out that it was originally the first prison of St. Augustine?
Well, the people we were renting from had a little bit of history, and really nice, super nice
Mhm.
people. That the building had been in the family for many years, and they said that it was their understanding that it had been the city jail at one point in its history. And my wife took the time to research it. Right across the street is the historical library, and in fact found out information that the building had been built in 1888 by the city of St. Augustine. Not exactly the way you see it now. It was kind of the back side of the building, which still exists. And they built two cells. The cells were used mostly for, well, I'd kind of describe it as Mayberry jail. It was used for those who perhaps were a bit inebriated. If you rode your horse too fast down the street, if you were of color and out past curfew, they would throw you in this two-cell jail. The the interesting thing was that the city used it for, well, 1888 to 1893 specifically. And then they built a new jail. I think it was on St. George Street. And at one point, for many years, there was a huge courthouse and a city jail on St. George at Hippolyta Street. And for those that are familiar with the city, that's where the Columbia restaurant sits now. So it was a city jail, but to the best of our knowledge, nobody of any major criminal history was housed there. If they were in fact bad people, so to speak, they would be taken to the county jail. Initially, the county jail was on Cordova Street, right near where the Ponce de Leon Hotel is now, and it had 5 cells. And again, people get confused between our jail from 1888 and there's another jail on the other end of town called the Old Jail. That was built in 1891 by Henry Flagler, who did not want the county jail to be so near his deluxe Ponce de Leon Hotel that he built in 1888. So, in essence, this city jail preceded what everybody knows as the Old Jail. Now, the Old Jail is phenomenal. They do tours there. They still, because they used that for so many years, they still have the cells intact, and the history of that jail is there. So it's great when you're in town to see.
The only evidence that was really apparent that it was a jail is if you look at the picture, you see to the left that little pink looking building. On that
Yeah.
side of the wall to the store, there was actually a window with bars in it. That's the only thing that represented it was ever any kind of jail to us as, newbies there.
So this picture right here. Now, I guess I guess what am I trying to say? Like, when did y'all find out that y'all had bars like that were actually still within the walls? How did that story transpire?
Well, again, when you were outside on the Spanish military hospital side of the building, and you looked at the outside wall, you could see the lower window was bricked in. I believe it was the lower one,
Mm-hmm.
but you could see bars on the top window outside. We didn't actually see the exposed windows inside, and which you're showing the picture right now. That was done by the next owner of the building. He took the sheetrock down in that area and exposed the bars, and they're the original bars from 1888. It was kind of a tall cell, so that there would be a little bit of air that would get in there. So I don't remember the exact date that he exposed those, but it was later on, and we were just thrilled. And just kind of as an afternote, after we were asked to leave the building when our lease expired, and the building owner basically gutted the entire store, ripped out all the walls and ceilings and so forth, he found more windows on the other side, which would have been to the second cell. So more bars, actually. So it was pretty amazing. We use the cells themselves, since there were no more bars indoors, doors as an example, we use them as rooms for merchandise. One was what we call a record room because we had a lot of vinyl in it, and the other was a library because we had a lot of antique books and things that people would pay attention
to. Now, in that particular room where the cells were, what kind of spiritual activity did you all have in that particular room? Was it prisoners, or I guess really I'm just trying to I'm wondering what kind of spiritual activity did you all have in that room?
Basing it on some of the conversations that I heard, probably is where I came up with that thought, but also seeing those bars in the windows helped us come to that conclusion.
We don't really think we didn't have any evidence that the prisoners themselves were talking to us.
Right.
What I think what we believe is the location of the building was where a lot of history had occurred in the city, because the street that the building is on, that the store is on, is Aviles Street, Aviles, which is considered to be the oldest continuously occupied colonial street in the continental United States. 1565, when basically Pedro Menendez de Aviles came to town, and knowing that you're on the oldest street, and the street right behind the store, and the store backed onto it, was the second oldest street, known as Charlotte Street. Now, Aviles at one time was called the Hospital Street, or the Street of the Royal Military Hospital, but I think Charlotte has always been Charlotte Street. And there is where the building is located, and on those streets, when you go to the bayfront, there was at one time, for many, many years, a mission called Los Remedios. And the actual building was on the bayfront, but the land, including the cemetery of Los Remedios, came all the way onto Aviles Street, all the way through Charlotte and onto Aviles. And again, we're talking about history from 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. I believe the mission was there through the 1800s. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, because I am getting old and sometimes forget. But not as old as the street, I hope. Anyway, yeah. So that's where we think most of the things occurred, on the land that was there, either behind us or around in proximity to where the jail had been built, because we don't know what was there beforehand. When we look at some of the old maps, it shows as an empty lot before 1888. Don't know what the Spanish may have used it for. We don't know what Native Americans may have used it for. We do know that some of the spirits that seemed to be part of the store as we got into investigating things, and we'll tell you how that began, but example. There was we believe he was a slave. He tended to hang around the record room a lot. Was very talkative, whether it was on a spirit box or lighting up REM pods or K2s. We called him Henry. We believe he was a Haitian house slave to some of these Spanish settlers, and of course his name was Henri officially, and he was treated well because he was in fact taking care of the children and the family. And those who do investigations know that you have to ask questions, and that's how you find out what is actually going on, what may be on the minds of the spirits that are still intelligent and communicative.
Hmm.
Right?
Mhm.
So, hit me. Another question? I mean, I will tell you
Oh,
how we began.
sorry, total brain fart. My bad. But
Well, is that what was just happened to my computer? Okay, I'm sorry.
oh, it's all good. Anyway, I guess since you all were talking about some like Los Remedios, the mission, do you want to tell everyone what was found? I think it was in the next lot over, like right next where the Spanish military hospital was.
Yes, honey, you want to do that? Or okay, she's going to let me do the talking because I had more to drink. So, uh, on Charlotte Street, and again, a lot of these streets are still cobblestone, including when I say cobblestone, bricks that Henry Flagler had installed in the early 1900s because he didn't want his hotel guests walking on mud or the old cypress. So sometimes things go wrong. You have the old sewer lines running underneath, and there was a massive leak in the sewer system that's hooked up to the city sewers. So they sent the crews in and they started pulling up these bricks. Now, keep in mind that anytime you do digs in the city of St. Augustine, there is actually a city archaeologist present because there is so much history that you're probably going to find. And as they were digging up the streets, they discovered, and again, you're right behind the store and right behind where the current Spanish military hospital is, they found, I believe, the number 23, I think 23 skeletal remains of who they believe to be original settlers in St. Augustine in the 1565 time frame.
Well, looks like we got a slight mishap, but we'll be okay. They'll pick up here in a sec. Oh, there we
It
go.
picks up. Oh, I like that spinning circle. It was a lot of fun.
So,
So the church was brought in as well, and they did remove and bless and rebury most of those skeletal remains. There was one gentleman who, the way he had been buried, his head kind of was under an existing building at the corner of King Street and Charlotte, so they left him there. They didn't remove his remains, and then they eventually, after the archaeologist got to check all the digs and everything and said, oh, this is where there used to be a hotel and this is where there was a fire. You just watch the layers of history that they dig up. But after they did all that, they put the cobblestones back, and there's no way that you could tell it all happened.
really? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a exact story that, when I was giving ghost tours in St. Augustine, that's one of the things that I learned from my friend and coworker, Travis. He was on here on the channel not long ago, but I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But
We know
since we're
Travis.
kind of,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, since we're kind of talking about that, like, what was the first real experience that you all had at the old jail, so to speak?
I think, well, before we bought the store, correct me if I'm wrong, honey. When we were in there one time, just looking around as tourists, there was an old door that went into the garage area, and the latch was just kind of moving up and down by itself. And my wife was saying, "There's something there," and I said, "There's nothing," because again, it takes a lot to convince me. Yeah, it's probably wind, you know, but she was convinced there was something there, and I think that was part of the feeling that she had on it. But after we purchased the store, we had shelves, we had a lot of merchandise. We had this stuffed bunny, which we still have here at the house, which is why we probably have ghosts here too. I don't believe in ghosts. It's okay. Uh, anyway, we had this bunny on a shelf, and we would leave at night and come in the morning, and the stuffed rabbit would be on the floor. This happened several times, and finally, I took that stuffed rabbit and I put it on the back end of the shelf, and I put all kinds of stuff in front of it so that it couldn't, accidentally fall because it was not sitting properly. Sure enough, we came in and everything was untouched except the bunny was on the floor again. So things like that you begin to pay attention to. Things like, you're in there talking to people during the day when you're running a retail operation. Things would fall off the shelf by themselves. Book that was way back would just plop. One book would fall on the floor.
When that book fell, a customer that was pretty close to that area, he took off because it
Oh wow!
like almost flew off the shelf. We didn't know what the heck happened.
No.
So I chased him down. I'm like, "What happened?" So he told me the book flew off the shelf.
That's the kind of stuff that happens that you just don't. You can't really explain it, but you have to be open-minded enough to understand that when things occur, there may be an explanation that you don't have. And so then you look at other possibilities. That's kind of the way I am about it.
Well,
So,
I mean, in the world of paranormal investigating, I mean that's kind of how you have to be. You have to be a skeptic first, before you move, to what's going on in the supernatural realm. What particular spirit is this? What did they do? Why are they here? You know what I'm saying? I know that you had mentioned that there may have been some form of attachment with that bunny. Anyway, that came from the antique store. Like, how often did you all have like any types of? Actually, I have a picture of one, for example. Like where people would buy something from your antique store and they would immediately return it because a bunch of weird stuff was going on.
uh, we had a doll, Meredith, who right now is that's Meredith. There she is. Hello, Meredith. Don't hurt me. Okay. Right now she's in the possession of a gentleman, philosopher, and author named John DeSalvo, and we were more than happy to let her go there. But before that, she was in the store, and a gentleman came in and bought her, just the way you see her. I mean, it's just like Americana collection, nothing special. And about a week later, I was in the store behind the counter. The guy comes in, has a bag with him, and just kind of looks at me and says, I want to return this. And he puts the bag on the counter and takes Meredith out of the bag. And again, this is about a week later. And I said, well, is there something wrong with her? Because, we had a policy, basically no returns, but we would do exchanges. unless we sold some faulty merchandise, then we take it back. But I said, okay, well, you know what? No, I want to return her. Well, okay, what's the reason? He said, well, my girlfriend saw her moving. I said, really? Yeah, it was my girlfriend. And I said, okay, look, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead. I won't give you a refund, but I'll give you an exchange. Go ahead and pick out anything else in the store. Guy said, I don't want anything from this store. I want to leave it here. It's yours. Take it back. I'm leaving. Goodbye. And he left. He just left. Now, based on his panic, my guess was he's the one who saw her move, not the girlfriend. I mean, just talking about it. I don't know, but that kind of stuff, people don't give up money that easily unless they feel there's a real reason. And
Yep.
Obviously he felt there was a real reason. So when the store closed, and John DeSalvo does a lot of investigations in the paranormal and interdimensional, has books written. Example, he was on TV for his research in the Shroud of Turin and so forth. So he continues to research with this doll. And there's another doll. What's the other one? Remember the name of the other doll?
Ooh.
I don't remember. But we had given the other doll to another friend, and Nancy Jean, gave the doll to John as well, so they could be back together again. Interesting. I mean, we don't know. I never really had much experience with her moving, but apparently John DeSalvo does. So there's something there.
Well, I find that very interesting because since we're on the topic, well, similar topic. One second. Speaking of dolls and whatnot, I've kind of noticed, there's a pattern between, toys and whatnot. Do you all want to talk about actually, this is the perfect picture right here, about the spirits of children.
Yes, and I'm gonna let my wife do the talking, and and the reason is that, and for those who want to see the episode, we were on My Ghost Story in 2012, caught on camera. You can go to I think it's I gotta think about that. Oh, dailymotion.com, and search for My Ghost Story season 5, episode 5. We're the second segment in, Leave Those Children Alone. And the reason I'm going to let my wife talk about the children is that they basically considered her their mother. She was the substitute mother that they obviously had lost over the years.
It was really amazing when I first realized there was children. I've always been sensitive, so I knew there was something in there, and that's probably what attracted me to the store. But I don't know, like I would feel tugs on my clothes and things like that. I'd hear giggling, and sometimes, believe it or not, this particular doll would be off the shelf and put on another shelf, and we know we didn't do it. Sometimes we'd come in, it'd be down on the floor. Something was happening.
The interesting thing, the picture you're looking at was taken by an investigator.
An investigator.
Because we used to, you mentioned Ghost Augustine. Ghost Augustine used to come into the store at night, and with guests. We had a camera running 24 hours a day in one of the back rooms, and guests had all kinds of experience. But this was taken by. Is this Michelle Vance who took that one?
Honestly, don't know.
Well, one of the investigators that was on My Ghost Story. But there's a picture, and if you look, you see that face. And you can almost, if you blow it up, it's difficult. But it looks like somebody in maybe Spanish garb. I don't know, a lady of some royalty, perhaps.
When I look at her, I see a kind of a crown on her head. The picture you're showing is kind of little, so you can't really see much detail. But if you blow it up and look at it, it looks like a crown.
Yeah.
We always wondered who she was. We'd hear her giggle sometimes. We think it was her. We don't really know, but um, things would move a little bit. I think she was kind of the mother figure for the little ones that were in there. That's just after you're in it 24/7, for months at a time, you start to figure things out. But it was, she wasn't nasty. We didn't have anybody nasty or mean.
Well, I'm going to say we did initially.
I mean, with the children.
Oh, with the children, yeah. There was, when we, shortly after we opened and before the My Ghost Story episode, so people didn't necessarily know, we had somebody who walked in the store, a lady who is in the paranormal field, among other things, named April Roan, and she has radio shows and does readings and so forth, and goes to a lot of paranormal conventions. She walked in the store. We didn't invite her. She just walked in and said, I was just drawn to this place. There's something going on here. And as she used her ability, she was telling us a story about some evil guy. We don't think it actually happened in the building, but probably on the land or in proximity to the land. But some evil guy was there at one point, and he used to capture young children, and he would use them for purposes that would get most people arrested, and then he would kill them. Now, there's nothing in history that we have found that supports that, so we'll say that right up front. But in all these investigations going on, there were, and I can't remember the names, but there was a 14-year-old girl who watched the other children that had been hurt by him, and they used to on recordings, EVPs and so forth, they would identify Denise as Mama. I think, as a matter of fact, in the My Ghost Story episode, Marilee Kaminsky, another one of the investigators, asked in that back room, do you consider Denise your mama? And the clear answer was yes. So, what we know is that there was, every once in a while in that store, we would smell, I guess the best way to describe it would be like a backed up septic system. And we believe it was when that evil entity, whoever that guy was hanging around. Now, we think, like most people who do that, when you're exposed, they don't want to be around. They don't want people to know what you did. But when we would smell that, I would say something, or my wife would say something like, hey, we know you're here. You don't belong here. We know what you did. Get out of here. You're not welcome. And the smell would be gone. Again, can't explain it, scientifically. I mean, like we flushed, so it wasn't that. Just,
We don't typically share kind of stories because people who aren't interested in paranormal look at you like you're
right. But we're not trying to prove anything to anybody. Everybody has to make up their own mind about what they feel when it comes to these kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that reminds me about my friend Melissa and a story that she was telling. Her grandfather had passed away, like, I think it was about a month prior, and she was just really, really broke up about it. And one night she had a dream that he met with her on in that same neighborhood that we discussed about. Well, the most haunted neighborhood in America, I like to call it. And he, in her dream, he knelt down and he said, Melissa, listen here, stop crying. I know you're, a good woman, and anyway, and he said, I'll always be with you. And next thing she woke up, she could smell like the really rich smell of Old Spice. And there was no Old Spice in that house whatsoever. And her grandfather, that's the only thing he used religiously was Old Spice. And Melissa, she at the time she woke up crying. Both her parents came in. Um, her mother, who was if I understood the lineage, her great grandmother is what they called a granny witch. I think I'm saying that
Mhm.
right. But anyway, something similar, similar to a clairvoyant. And anyway, her father, who was a Baptist preacher, didn't believe in ghosts whatsoever. I mean, for the very first time in her life, she saw doubt and fear in her father's eyes because he couldn't explain where the smell of Old Spice was coming from. He didn't have it. She didn't have it, but they could clearly smell. It was almost pungent, the
Oh,
smell of Old Spice. But so yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the different smells. I so what was I going to say? So I so what was it like being on my ghost story? How did all of that transpire? Like, what got the powder keg on that going?
I, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, honey, but I think somebody who had been in the store actually wrote the producers of my ghost story. Now, at the time, it was the biggest show on TV for this kind of stuff. I think it ran for about 10 years, and the producers contacted us and said, "Okay, sure, everybody wants to be on TV. Send us evidence." So my
we did.
wife, right, said evidence, and they finally said, "That's enough. Stop. We don't want to see anymore. We that's more than we can handle." Um, and the way the producers did my ghost story, it's a little different than a lot of the stuff on TV now. And I'm not picking on anybody specifically, but there are people on TV that, my personal opinion, and I qualify that it's my opinion, make stuff up. Okay, it's just made up and scripted, and just based on my experience, I do not believe that you get an EVP and a voice and a ghost every 2.5 seconds. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, um, so the producers said, "Okay, we we like what we see. We would love you to be on our show." How does that work? Well, they say, "Okay, this is the date. We're filming several shows, several segments for different shows out in Los Angeles." So they pay for us to fly, coach. Trust me, teeny tiny coach. We went from Jacksonville. I think we went to Chicago, and then Chicago to L.A. They put us up at a hotel for 2 nights, breakfast included, and they gave us each a per diem of $100 each for any other meals. Now, for those who may have been in Los Angeles, you know that $100 is good for about a hot dog and a can of Coke
And a boiled egg.
and a boiled egg. Yeah.
Yep.
This is 2012, but okay. So now they have you at their studio. They take you one day, and you go to the studio early in the morning, and the filming in their studio, they separate you. So Denise is in one studio and I'm in another, or at different times. And there is a producer off camera, and the producer is asking you questions, and you answer the questions in your own words. So it's not scripted. The only thing scripted are the taglines like "My ghost story began," things like that. But everything that is done, with you telling your own stories. Then 3 weeks later, they sent a camera guy to St. Augustine who filmed the city, filmed some recreations of things, of stories that we had, and also integrated some of the original EVPs and video that we supplied into the segment. So consider that there's about 26 hours or so of film and audio. Then the producers chop, and they take that 26 hours and make it into a 13-minute episode. They don't tell you what they're going to use. They don't change what you say, they just use it the way they want to so they can fit it into their show. So that was in May of 2012. And they finally told us, like 3 days before they were going to air it, that they were going to air it in their Halloween show, October 26th of 2012. And they wait until then. So when, for those who are interested and watch that segment, in essence, it's my wife and myself doing all the narration of the program. And it's us just telling the story basically like we're doing now. Chet asks a question, we answer it. Producer asked a question, we answer it. They don't change your answers. And that to me was an amazing way of doing it rather than scripting it like so many shows are nowadays.
And speaking of scripting, I don't know why it comes to mind, but we might be talking about the same individual, Zach Bagans.
Yes.
Reading minds. I swear, it's like, in the paranormal investigative world, it's like a major no-no to go into a building screaming at these things. That's, well, I mean, I'm not going to swear, but it's, well, I mean, I'll say it once. It's an ass whooping waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Pardon my language, but it's like, I think I can go with one swear word, and YouTube won't strike me down. But yeah, I mean, it's like, people nowadays, they want hard-hitting evidence right then, right there, and it's like, do you realize like how hard it is to get really good evidence? It's extremely hard. Not long ago, I'm pretty sure you all saw it. I know, well, with new management over at Ghost Augustine, Jonas is still, it's his baby. But
Right.
It was one particular group that was at the Huguenot Cemetery, and they got a picture of the judge that was spot on, perfect apparition, Holy Grail.
Wow.
And it's like, you got to think, I mean, they're doing tours night after night after night. And you got to think that one particular time that might not even happen throughout most of the year, they got one. So it takes a long time.
And that's something that we discovered. I mean, there were times that people would come in the store and nothing would happen, and we would always tell people, we're not going to guarantee you any kind of activity. That's not what we do. But there were times that people just it was crazy in there from the time people walked in till they left, and and again, there were always people who would say things like, "Well, how are you doing all that?" And my answer was, well, look around. Do you see it? Is there anywhere you'd like to look? All the closets are open. The bathrooms are open. You tell me how we could possibly be doing this. And the answer is we're not. It's you're seeing it yourself. Well, I don't believe it. Well, you don't have to. That's great. I'm glad you had a good time.
It was always fun for me to bring people in. I know you're not familiar with the store, but there was a back room and a library. And, of course, everybody wanted to know the stories, especially after we were on my ghost story. And I'd tell them, just go in, walk around, see if you feel anything, that kind of stuff. You can't believe how many people ran out of that store. Just ran. And I knew it wasn't that active.
Including one tour guide from Ghost Augustine. We won't mention his name.
It's funny because it was very real. I mean, we weren't making up anything. The picture that you're looking at now comes from the back room. Those louver doors is what, closed off the closet. And that area was so busy all the time. I don't mean with people, I mean with spirit. All the time. And you could hear children giggling. I don't know. Obviously, I couldn't talk to them and get, an answer I'd be looking for. But I have to wonder if she was like the caretaker or the mother. But I would say at least 3 children back in that back room. What do you think?
Well, I would say that too. And plus, we would do, during the day when people were not doing tours, we would leave equipment hooked up. We had a a 24-hour infrared camera going in the back room that we left on YouTube all the time, and people were able to comment on it, and there was no charge for it. We just did it, and but a lot of times during the day also it was dark back there, so we would set up the REM pods or K2s and things, flashlights, and it was just interesting to see that when there was nobody there, we would see things happening. So it again. I'm always a skeptic, and I'm very skeptical about things, including things that I may think that I saw. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I was tired. I don't know. But prior to having the store, there was no way you would ever convince me that there were spirits of any kind other than what we see, every single day in a bottle of Jack Daniels. And, that was it. And, I got to the point, there were certain things that I saw, and unfortunately we don't have the video. We tried, it's around somewhere. Somebody was going to send it to me, but I guess they got busy. But there's a video where my wife is sitting behind the point of sale counter, and she's there with a friend, and the friend has her camera running, her phone, and right behind my wife, behind her, it would be her right shoulder, is a Coke cooler, a glass front Coke cooler, because we used to sell drinks. And she's sitting there, and they're talking, and all of a sudden the cooler just opens. And I keep in mind, this is a commercial cooler with magnetic catches. They don't just open. They're designed to be sealed tightly, and it just opened by itself. So after that, I did everything I could to try to make it. I wasn't there then, but went back in, and I jump up and down on the floor and beat the Coke machine and try to do anything to get that door to open. And I could not do it unless I actually grabbed the handle and pulled on it. And something did that. There was no way you could even set that, where it would be close to being closed. Because if you were that close, the magnetic catch would catch it and shut it. So things like that, when they occur, you got to go,
I'll tell you, Chet, I do have a video. One of us was behind the counter and one was on the other side. And all of a sudden, the Coke machine opened all by itself.
That's the one. Yeah.
So I'm looking for that video to send to you. I have so many now. I've been looking for 2 days trying to send it, but I couldn't find it. I hope it's still there.
Yeah.
1 second. I think since we're on the topic, what's this one exactly? How did this? I take it was a some form of orb, or anyway, I'll let y'all explain.
Well, what I would do during the day, I would hear little noises come from this back room. This was our storeroom. And I don't know. I just decided to go back there and leave the lights off and take a picture, and that's what I got. Did I see any of that with my own eyes? Absolutely not. But I think what fascinates me the most, even more so than the big orangey looking light, is those 2 scratches on the wall, those 2 lines on the wall. It's like, what?
Oh yes, I see that. Sorry.
See that? It's like, what in the world is that? They weren't there. They weren't painted on or anything. So it every day was an adventure.
And that's something that, as an example, because of those lines, my first thought would be, oh, well, there's some kind of a reflection back there. It's reflecting off something behind it. But I tried to recreate it, and I was unable to do it. So I don't know.
My Mr. Skeptic, he never believed anything.
Well, it's, I'd rather test the theory and be a lot more positive that it's something I don't understand than just, poo-poo it and say, yeah, something behind it, I'm done. I mean, people will interpret things their own way. We had somebody who was doing an investigation. It might have been with Ghost Augustine. I don't know. But anyway, they took a picture at night when the lights were off, and they sent it to us and said, "Oh, look at this. Look at this stuff. What is?" it's some kind of spirit. What is it? So I looked at the picture they sent, the angle of the picture, and then I realized what it was. They had taken a picture of our modem next on the shelf, and at night, it looked weird. So I sent them, a picture of it in the daytime. I sent it back. Said, "Look, I really appreciate it, and I don't pretend to know everything, but my guess is you took a picture of our AT&T modem, and it was actually working. Thank you."
Oh my god. I mean, again, it's just one of those things, when you have to, you know, going in as an investigator, you have to have that I mean, it's almost crucial to have that skeptical mindset because I mean, I feel like I've said it a couple of times, but one second. There is another photo this may have been the one y'all were talking about. Um said something about a tour guide when I found this picture.
I think, is this the one with the
ladies here.
The
we don't
face
know what.
right here.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Um, it looks like it. There may be a bunch of K2s underneath it.
Hmm.
So maybe on top of the counter, there was on the front counter there was what we believe to be a young guy, probably around 12 years of age, by the name of Timmy, and we think that over the course of investigations, Timmy had been a cabin boy on one of the ships that got into trouble off the coast of St. Augustine and sank and lost his life there. But I was that, and I truly don't remember specifics on that. That might be where that counter is, and that mist
Hmm.
was probably him.
But if you look in the background behind the mist, that's actually a lady. Or it could be a child, I guess, if they're pretty close.
Yeah.
It's a small picture here. But yeah, that was fascinating. Like, whoa, what is this? But I'm
Hmm.
going to tell you, it, nobody in there was rotten as far as all the spirits go. And I mean, St. Augustine,
Except the first guy. Yeah.
right. Um, the street that we were on is Avonlea Street, which is
Uh, the oldest.
the oldest street in the United States. No telling what is under there, under the bricks on the street. They pop up all the time, but you don't see anything really. It's just, it's amazing. No matter where you go, you either get the sense that somebody's, with you, or nobody ever harmed anybody.
Well, and the thing is, and Chet, you worked in St. Augustine. You almost get that feeling any place you
Hmm.
go in that city, uh,
Yep. Exactly.
right? I mean, when I was in school, back in the Middle Ages, um, they didn't teach that St. Augustine was the first colonial city. I was Jamestown, right?
Right.
Yep.
Um, but we know that St. Augustine preceded, I don't know, it's 42 years, something like that, before Jamestown. And now they teach it. They teach the history. And
Yep.
yes, Spanish were colonialists, and Spanish counted. They try to they were concentrating on English history and not on what actually happened. But you can't be anywhere in the city and not feel that, number one, the history, and number two, the spiritual history that has to be existing there.
Yep. You know, Speaking of that kind of energy, I mean, especially like where Avila Street was, I mean, you got to think, or at least so I was taught by, well, when I was being trained as a guide, it's like, all that area, that was all a Timacuan burial ground. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
and I mean, it's like every time we would walk by if I understood correctly, it was the it's a private Catholic school now, but it was a nunnery, I believe, for a time. But anyway, it's like every time, like I would take like guests there and give them the tour. I mean, we would always get activity, but the thing that in particular that I found out about those type of entities is, they are the spirits of Native Americans, Timucuan Indians, and they're not really too fond of people staying for long periods of time. Um, Actually, I think that's when I had an attachment, and that was not fun. But yeah, going back to, I mean, you could walk anywhere in the city of St. Augustine, and I mean, the energy is, it's down in the limestone, because limestone, is a perfect conduit for electricity,
Yeah.
or so, or at least that's in the paranormal investigative world. Um, One second, there was, so I guess I'm kind of curious. How did y'all meet Jonas, the owner of Ghost Augustine?
I believe that we were contacted
Right.
about perhaps doing something with him. And and Jonas and I still communicate every once in a while on Facebook. I have a lot of respect for what he has done over the years. So, but we sat down, we met with him, we discussed what his needs were. We discussed what we would expect of tour guides, because we were not going to be there, and we were giving access to people, and we know that a lot of people on tours can be a little difficult to deal with, and as a tour guide, that.
Yep.
So, but we kind of discussed everything and came to an agreement, and Jonas lived up 100,000% to everything that we talked about, and it was a pleasure working with Ghost Augustine. And in fact, if we still had the store, we probably still would be doing it with Ghost Augustine. And we know a lot of other people in the business, but the way that it was handled was as professional as could be. But there were no expectations of anything that wasn't real. And to us, that was extremely important. Jonas never said, "Hey, let me put, I don't know, some kind of RF generator back in here so that the meters will go off." He never did anything like that. It was, whatever happens, happens, and we won't tell people, other than the fact that there are plenty of experiences that they can see on YouTube and so forth. We won't tell them they're going to experience anything. We will just say others have, and I think that's
Mhm.
fair. Matter of fact, I think as I recall, in the Beer Hammers retail store on St. George Street, they used to play the My Ghost Story video in a loop silently, but it was always up on the video monitor, because it was such a great location to investigate.
Yep.
So yeah,
I remember that because, well, I mean, they didn't play it, but the TV was always on top. But
right.
what, like, since the jail is, well, or I guess antique store, since it is under, or at least it looks like it's under new management, are you all going to try to maybe make a proposition, or I guess,
I
is there going to
I
be
don't
any?
I don't think so. I don't know what they're going to be opening there. It might be an antique store. I hope so, for the sake of the street. And the people who own it will probably have their own experiences, and maybe do things. If they ever have any questions about it, we're more than happy to discuss it. Every once in a while we'll go do an investigation someplace, whether it's the old Clay County Jail or the Hamilton Jail, things like that. We've done those, and we know people who are involved in that and do a tremendous job. But with all due respect, I have kind of looked at it and enjoyed the time we were there, enjoyed the experiences. But I think I told you I just hit my 72nd birthday, and staying up at night. As a matter of fact, you've already kept me up an hour past my bedtime. So what's up with you?
Oh, actually, speaking of that, we are actually coming near the end. As you all probably noticed, I usually keep it to about an hour. But anyway, you guys, thank you all so much for being on here. everyone who has tuned in to this podcast. The link to this My Ghost Story episode will be in the link below in this video. Anyway, Larry, Denise, thank you all so much. I'm going to let you go on ahead and hit the hay. And 1 second. Still about. Anyway, thank you guys for staying posted and staying tuned on this awesome video. Like I said, this has been a very wonderful haunt season series. Stay posted for the new fascinating people and extraordinary stories. But anyway, guys, remember, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Always means a lot. Goes to show that y'all care and that y'all want to see more awesome videos. So without further ado, guys, podcast interview over. And